My brother stole my startup idea while I worked 70-hour weeks. So I waited, played along, and now he's begging me to reverse everything. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I poured every ounce of my time, energy, and savings into building my startup. Some people spend weekends binge-watching shows or scrolling through social media. I spent mine hunched over my laptop, tweaking code, refining pitches, and obsessing over every little detail that could make my product revolutionary. I was consumed. 70-hour weeks became the norm. Coffee, my closest companion, and sleep a luxury I couldn't afford. My friends called me obsessive. My parents said I needed a real job, but I couldn't stop. Every late night, every skipped outing, every penny invested felt like an inch closer to something bigger than myself, a product that could change the way people interacted with technology. Alex, my younger brother by 3 years, always hovered nearby. "Man, you're gonna burn out before you even launch," he'd joke, grinning like he was just teasing. But there was something in his eyes, something I couldn't place whenever I'd dive into a new idea or rant about growth strategies. He'd casually say, I could probably run this faster if I had the chance, and I'd laugh it off, thinking it was just sibling teasing. But looking back now, those offhand comments weren't harmless. They were tiny breadcrumbs, little signals of envy masked as humor. Friends admired my dedication. They called me driven, visionary, untouchable. And yet, every time Alex walked into a room, my parents lit up. "Alex is so easygoing," they'd gush. "He has such a way with people." They didn't see the long nights I spent debugging features or pitching investors. They only saw him smiling, charming, effortlessly social, taking zero risks and somehow winning praise for it. I remember nights when I'd sit on the balcony, staring at the city lights, my fingers raw from typing, thinking maybe I was too consumed by this dream. I'd glance at Alex, sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, and a smirk playing at his lips. There was this flicker of something harmless smile. Or was it the start of a storm I couldn't yet see? Either way, the game had begun, and I had no idea just how personal it would get. It started small, almost unnoticeable, like a shadow in the corner of my vision. Alex began asking more pointed questions about the startup. "So, how exactly are you planning to handle the user onboarding flow? Or have you thought about scaling the server architecture if traffic spikes?" At first, I assumed it was curiosity, maybe even genuine interest. But the way he leaned in, scribbling notes on his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, made a pit form in my stomach. I brushed it off as paranoia. After all, he was my brother. Brothers were supposed to be supportive. Then came the moments that made my skin crawl. He started repeating my ideas in casual conversation, framing them as hypothetical scenarios. Imagine if someone made an app that could do X, Y, and Z. And I'd freeze mid-explanation, realizing he had just stolen the phrasing of something I'd spent hours perfecting. "Ha ha, I'm just thinking out loud," he'd laugh, tossing me a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Friends noticed too. One evening, we were discussing potential monetization models, and Alex jumped in with almost identical strategies to the ones I had just brainstormed privately. My heart sank, but I didn't confront him yet. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he genuinely didn't realize he was repeating me. Maybe it was coincidence. But there was a new tension whenever he was around. My parents, oblivious as always, praised him for his initiative and business acumen. While I sat there, voice tightening, trying to keep calm, the smell of burnt coffee from my laptop heating up in the small home office felt comforting yet. Ironic, it was the only thing keeping me grounded amidst this growing unease. As I sketched out the new user interface, Alex leaned against the doorframe, casually commenting, "If you want, I could handle the investor pitch next week. You've been working too hard." I forced a smile, pretending I hadn't noticed the subtle smugness in his tone. Deep down, I felt a knot twist in my chest, the first real whisper of doubt. Maybe this wasn't just harmless teasing. Maybe my brother was looking to take more than advice from me. I couldn't shake the feeling that the first real battle had already begun, and I had no idea how far it would go. I'll never forget the exact moment I realized Alex had crossed the line. I was scrolling through LinkedIn one morning, bleary-eyed from another 5 a.m. coding session, when a notification made me freeze. There it was, his new startup page, complete with branding, mission statements, and a product pitch that mirrored mine down to the smallest detail. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Every sleepless night, every missed family dinner, every cent I had poured in to research it, all seemed to be in someone else's hands now. I read through his investor pitch and felt my hands shake. Features I'd brainstormed weeks ago were listed as his innovations. Technical solutions I had agonized over were now attributed to him. I could almost hear him smirking through the screen. I called my friends, my voice tight. Guys, did Alex just copy my entire idea? Their silence was deafening, followed by a flurry of messages confirming my worst fears. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was professional, a violation of every boundary I'd trusted. When I confronted him that evening, trying to keep my voice steady, he laughed it off. "Relax, man. I'm just experimenting." "You take things way too seriously," he said, leaning back in his chair, fingers drumming on the desk. But there was no humor behind it, only arrogance. The smell of his cologne, sharp, familiar, maddening, mingled with the faint scent of printer ink and new paper. The very tools I had used to prepare my original investor packets. It was like he had stolen not just my work, but the essence of my effort. That night, I sat on the balcony. The city lights blurred through my tears and replayed every moment leading up to this. The jokes, the helpful advice, the casual comments, they weren't innocent. My brother hadn't just copied an idea, he had weaponized my trust. I felt an icy clarity settle over me. Confronting him head-on wouldn't fix this. I needed a plan. I needed patience. And for the first time, I realized the fight wasn't just about my startup. It was about proving who I was. Not just to him, but to myself. And in that silence, I swore I wouldn't let him walk away with everything. After the initial shock wore off, I realized rage alone wouldn't fix anything. Confronting Alex head-on would probably backfire. He was too slick, too charming, and now too cocky to take responsibility willingly. So, I made a decision that haunted me at first. I would play along. I would let him think he was ahead, all while secretly observing every move, documenting every interaction, and planning my next steps carefully. The idea of patience felt foreign. I was a man used to action, not waiting. But I knew that patience, strategic patience, would be more powerful than any outburst of anger. I started subtly feeding him advice that seemed helpful, but was loaded with traps. "Maybe you should focus on this feature first. It's what investors love." I'd say, watching his excitement build, while knowing that pivot could stretch his resources thin. Each time he repeated my strategies to potential backers, I took mental notes, building a record that could protect me later. The smell of coffee in the office and the soft hum of my laptop became my companions as I worked behind the scenes, turning frustration into calculation. Emotionally, it was exhausting. Every time he laughed about my original idea, a wave of betrayal surged through me. Yet I forced myself to keep my composure, smiling when necessary, nodding at his overconfidence, all while internally counting the ways I could reclaim what was mine. Friends would ask why I hadn't confronted him yet, and I'd brush it off. I need to see the full picture first. One evening, he came in, waving an email from an investor. "Look at this." "They loved my pitch," he said, eyes sparkling with pride. I clapped, pretending to share his enthusiasm, while internally, I cataloged every misstep he had made in the proposal. The anger was still there, simmering, but now it was controlled, focused. I understood something crucial. This wasn't just about a startup anymore. It was a game of strategy, and I intended to win. And as I watched him bask in his temporary victory, I realized this was only the beginning, and the real battle had just begun. Alex's arrogance grew faster than I anticipated. The more I played along, the more he believed he was the mastermind behind our shared ideas. He started taking bold, reckless moves, promising impossible milestones to investors, exaggerating projections, and pushing the team beyond their limits. Every time he bragged, his chest puffed out like a peacock, and I felt a strange mix of disgust and amusement. The smell of fresh coffee from the office kitchen, usually comforting, now felt like the background noise of his overconfidence, the scent of his ego filling the air. One evening, he called me over, waving a stack of printed slides. "Look, I nailed this presentation. Investors were blown away. They think I'm a genius." He laughed, slapping me on the back. I nodded politely, keeping my expression neutral, while mentally noting every exaggeration, every inaccuracy. Behind the smile, I was calculating how fragile his success really was. The team, meanwhile, was starting to show cracks. Whispers of exhaustion and concern floated around the office, but Alex waved them off with charm and bravado. Even friends started noticing the disparity between his confidence and reality. "Are you sure this is sustainable?" one of my mentors asked me discreetly. I smiled faintly, knowing I had the bigger picture in hand. Each of Alex's careless steps brought him closer to a point of exposure. My patience, once painful, now felt strategic, almost empowering. Then, something unexpected happened. Alex made a glaring mistake in the financial projections, one that could easily have been catastrophic if investors noticed. He didn't see it coming. My heart raced not with glee, exactly, but with the cold satisfaction of knowing that his overconfidence had set the stage for my eventual move. As I watched him walk around the office, bragging and basking in praise, I realized that the midpoint of this battle was approaching. He was walking straight into the trap I had been carefully setting. The question lingering in my mind was simple. Would he fall, or would I have to push him? I started to get intentional. Every conversation with Alex became a chess move. I'd casually suggest improvements that seemed helpful on the surface, but were carefully designed to expose his weaknesses. Maybe try reaching out to smaller investors. First, they love early traction. I'd say, knowing he'd interpret it as a shortcut and rush things without checking the fine print, I was guiding him, not saving him. Every nod of agreement, every good idea he threw back at me, felt like laying the foundation for the eventual reversal. It was emotionally exhausting, though. I had to keep my face neutral, while inside I was screaming at the sheer audacity of his arrogance. I could smell the faint lingering of printer ink and marker dust in the office. A reminder of the countless hours I'd spent preparing the real plans he was now trying to implement. Nights blurred into mornings, and the hum of my laptop became the soundtrack of quiet vengeance. Alex's dependence on me grew without him realizing it. He started asking for my advice more frequently, often checking with me before every investor call or marketing tweak. "What do you think?" he'd ask, leaning over my shoulder. And I would answer, carefully, strategically, feeding him guidance that seemed helpful but was subtly steering him toward mistakes. I felt a dark satisfaction watching him unknowingly dig his own holes. I even noticed how others in the office began to question him quietly. Team members would exchange glances, whisper doubts, and hesitate to commit fully to his overconfident commands. He didn't notice, yet too busy basking in praise and imagining himself as the genius behind it all. By the end of the week, I realized something chilling. I wasn't just waiting for him to slip. I was orchestrating it. And the closer I got, the more I understood that patience, planning, and subtle manipulation were my allies. One misstep, one overreach from him, and everything could fall into place. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dim office lights, and whispered to myself, "Soon. He'll see what I've known all along." I should have seen it coming. But even I was taken aback by how far Alex would go. One Friday afternoon, he stormed into the office waving a contract like a trophy. I just locked the lead investor. This is it time officially in control now. His grin stretched impossibly wide eyes, sparkling with a mix of triumph and arrogance. But as I leaned over to glance at the details, my stomach sank. He had promised deliverables he couldn't possibly meet, exaggerated projections, and overlooked critical clauses that could jeopardize the company entirely. The smell of freshly brewed coffee did nothing to calm my rising panic. My hands twitched as I leafed through the pages, each line a glaring reminder of his overreach. Employees whispered in corners, tension palpable. One of our junior engineers muttered, "He doesn't even know what he's signing." Alex, of course, remained oblivious, his focus entirely on basking in praise from the investor's representative on the phone. It hit me then, he'd gone too far. This wasn't a small mistake or a learning curve. This could sink everything. My heart raced, adrenaline and a surge of cold clarity flooding through me. I realized I now had more power than I ever did while building the company myself. He was so confident, so sure of his genius, that he'd revealed the exact weaknesses I'd been waiting to exploit emotionally. It was a strange mixture of dread and satisfaction. I hated the risk to my work, but part of me thrilled at the thought that the tables were turning. For the first time, I felt fully in control, like the entire game was shifting beneath his unsuspecting feet. As I sat quietly at my desk, watching him celebrate, I knew the midpoint had arrived. The plan wasn't just about patience anymore, it was about seizing the moment. And deep down, I felt a shiver of anticipation. The storm I had been building toward was finally within reach. I glanced at Alex, laughing and pacing, oblivious to the danger ahead. And I knew one thing for certain: soon, he would wish he'd never taken my ideas. Even with the plan in motion, I hit a moment I never expected: complete, suffocating despair. One evening, I stayed late, staring at the spreadsheets and investor emails, feeling the weight of everything I'd poured into the startup. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, the hum of the office eerily silent, and the city lights outside my window blurred into streaks through my exhaustion. I realized that while I was carefully orchestrating revenge, the emotional toll was crushing me. Every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every moment of stress was catching up, and I felt utterly alone. Alex's overconfidence had consequences I hadn't fully anticipated. His reckless promises were starting to trigger small panic waves in the team. Developers were frustrated, investors were asking tough questions, and the tension was palpable. I felt responsible, even though it wasn't truly my fault. Part of me hated that my careful patience had led to this fragile chaos, and for a moment, I wondered if I could really see it through. The loneliness was worse than anger. I remembered calling my friends, my voice tight and shaky. I don't know if I can do this. Maybe I should just confront him and be done with it. But the response was the same as always: patience. Strategy. They reminded me that my work and foresight were invaluable, and that losing my composure now could ruin everything I'd built. I leaned back, my fingers brushing the edge of my laptop, staring at the glow of the code one had written, the slides I had prepared, the careful notes I had kept stolen, all in his hands. And yet, for the first time, I also realized the scope of what I could achieve if I stayed calm. As I watched the office clock tick past midnight, I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, I can't let him win. I won't, but this is heavier than I thought. The weight of it all pressed down, and I knew the moment of true reckoning was approaching, but I had to endure this darkness before the payoff could come. After that night of doubt, I woke up with a new clarity. I couldn't let Alex's recklessness destroy everything I had built, but I also knew I couldn't confront him outright yet. So I began the strategic takeover in earnest, carefully reclaiming control without him noticing. Every investor email, every meeting, every minor decision became an opportunity. I quietly reviewed contracts, corrected missteps in his projections, and subtly guided employees to follow my lead without making it obvious. Alex still believed he was in control, strutting around the office, waving success in my face like it belonged to him. Look at these numbers. We're finally moving fast, he exclaimed, beaming. I nodded along, pretending to admire him, all while ensuring that every step he took relied on information I could manipulate. His overconfidence was a tool, now a weakness I could exploit. Emotionally, it was a delicate balance. I had to keep my anger in check, my face neutral, my words supportive. Every smile I gave him felt like a mask hiding the fire inside me. The hum of the office, the clatter of keyboards, the faint smell of printer ink, everything seemed magnified in this tense atmosphere. I could feel the tension in the air as the team subtly started relying on me more than him, even if they didn't realize it. One by one, I nudged the pieces into place. Investors now looked to me for clarification. Team members sought my guidance over his, and Alex remained blissfully unaware of the erosion of his authority. Every casual question I answered, every helpful suggestion I made, tightened my control. By the end of the week, I realized I wasn't just reclaiming what was mine, I was proving a point. Alex had underestimated me at every turn, and now he was unknowingly walking into a position where I held all the power. And as I watched him boast and celebrate, I knew the confrontation was inevitable. It was only a matter of time before he realized how carefully he had been played. The confrontation didn't happen in a dramatic showdown. It was quiet, calculated, and unavoidable. I waited for the perfect moment, a meeting when Alex was sure he was in control and the team looked to him for guidance. I leaned back in my chair as he strutted in, confident and grinning, and calmly said, "Alex, we need to talk about the investor projections." His smile faltered slightly, a flicker of unease I'd been waiting for. I laid it out step by step, the copied strategies, the exaggerated claims, the mismanaged emails, the contracts he didn't understand. I presented everything with calm precision, my voice steady while the truth landed like a hammer. "These mistakes could have destroyed the company," I said, "and yet you thought you could handle it all on your own." His face paled, eyes darting, hands twitching. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional shuffle of papers, the scent of stale coffee hanging heavy in the air. "I thought I could manage," he stammered, trying to regain composure, but the cracks were obvious. The team shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us, sensing the unraveling. "You copied the entire structure from me," I continued, each word measured, leaving no room for argument. The evidence was irrefutable, meticulously documented over weeks. Emotionally, it was surreal, part vindication, part lingering sorrow. He was my brother, and yet here he was, humiliated and cornered by the very person he had tried to outsmart. The adrenaline coursed through me, but I kept my expression calm, letting the weight of truth do the work. Finally, he slumped into the chair, defeated, muttering apologies I barely heard. And in that quiet moment, I realized the battle had shifted irrevocably. The scales had tipped, and I held the upper hand entirely. But as I watched him process the reality of his failures, I knew the final act wasn't over. He still had one last move, and I had to decide whether to let him make it, or finish it for him. Alex's pride crumbled completely the next morning. He cornered me in the office kitchen, eyes wide, voice shaking. "Please, please, I can fix this. Just give me another chance," he begged, gripping the edge of the counter like a lifeline. I didn't mean for any of it to go this far. I'll reverse everything. Just tell me how." His desperation was raw, almost pitiful, and it filled the room like a heavy, suffocating fog. The faint smell of burnt coffee from the old machine lingered, oddly accentuating the tension, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. I stood there, silent at first, letting the weight of his words sink in. Every pleading syllable reminded me of the weeks I had spent working around the clock, documenting his missteps and quietly reclaiming control. The betrayal he had inflicted wasn't just professional, it was personal. And now, here he was, realizing too late that he had underestimated me at every turn. "You really think I can just trust you again?" I asked, voice calm but icy. He shook his head frantically, eyes darting around, unsure where to meet mine. "I'll do whatever you say." "Please," he stammered. For a moment, I almost felt sorry, seeing the arrogance stripped away to reveal a frightened small man beneath. Almost, but this was more than revenge, was a lesson. I let him stew in his helplessness, feeling the quiet power shift completely into my hands. His pleas echoed in the room as I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Watching him squirm under the weight of consequences he had brought on himself, finally, he slumped to the floor, muttering broken apologies. The realization hit him. I wasn't just reclaiming the startup, I was proving a point about foresight, resilience, and patience. And as he sat there, defeated, I understood something crucial. Sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't loud or violent. It's quiet, complete, and undeniable. I left him there for a moment, breathing deeply, knowing the final closure was near and that the lesson had been etched in stone by the time the dust settled. I held full control over the startup I had built from the ground up. Alex remained on the office floor, humbled, defeated, and painfully aware of just how much he had underestimated me. I walked past him, the hum of the office, quiet but purposeful around me, the faint scent of printer ink and stale coffee, a reminder of every late night I had sacrificed. Every investor, every employee, every strategy was now aligned under my guidance. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. Emotionally, it was a mixture of exhaustion and elation. I had survived betrayal, manipulation, and envy, not just with my business, but with my own self-respect intact. I reflected on the months of planning, patience, and calculated restraint, understanding that the hardest battles aren't always fought openly. Alex's pleading, his desperate promises, his obvious regret, all of it became a lesson in the power of foresight and emotional discipline. He eventually tried to return to the corporate world, pitching other startups and ideas. But without credibility or trust, doors closed in his face. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had all the charm in the world, yet nothing else mattered without integrity and real effort. I, on the other hand, had not only reclaimed what was mine, but had fortified it, ensuring that no one could ever steal it again. As I stood on the balcony late that evening, city lights stretching out before me, I felt an unexpected calm. The adrenaline and anger had faded, replaced by a sense of quiet empowerment. I knew the fight had tested me, reshaped me, and ultimately proved my worth not just as a founder, but as someone who could navigate betrayal with intelligence and patience. Looking down at Alex, still processing his failures, I allowed a small, satisfied smile. Justice had been served, and I hadn't had to compromise my values to achieve it. The battle was over, and I had emerged not just victorious, but stronger, wiser, and untouchable. The full story arc is now complete, with conflict escalation, midpoint twist, rock-bottom moment, and a climactic payoff designed for high emotional impact and viral retention. If you want, I can also create a cinematic, YouTube-ready script version with dialogue cues, sensory details, and pacing notes optimized for a 30 to 60-minute video. Do you want me to do that next?